The following Connecticut Experience presentation is part of the ongoing partnership between the Connecticut Humanities Council and Connecticut Public Television. Together, we're exploring Connecticut's rich history and culture.
More than 3 million of us call Connecticut home. But who are we? Who do we think we are?
Connecticut has always had an identity problem. You've never known whether to be the big city sophisticates of New York or the Calvinist farmers of New England.
What do we have in common? And what divides us? Do we share a sense of place?
When people think of Connecticut, they don't think of anything in particular. And I think that's fine. I mean, there's no reason for us to get chauvinistic and say we in Connecticut all believe in one thing or another.
It sounds like a roadside attraction, Connecticut, the mystery state.
What is it? Who are they?
People kind of identify Connecticut with the white picket fences and the small town. But in reality, Connecticut from the mid-19th century on has been a very urban, a very ethnic, a very industrial place, a varied kind of a place, even though it's small.
Not entirely New York, not entirely New England. Is Connecticut, after all, just a place between Boston and New York? Or is there more to it than that?
Connecticut is the wealthiest state in the country, which makes it the wealthiest place on the face of the earth. Now, the economy of this state and the region is crumbling, and that may bring about some fundamental changes.
We are really, in most people's minds, 169 little sovereign states. What I see is a state that's fractionalized by the traditions that we hold.
The search for a shared identity is far from academic. As Connecticut turns the century, it faces many economic, social, and political challenges that will demand of its residents a shared sense of place and a common purpose.
There are a number of issues that I think exist these days that really bring to the forefront the fact that Connecticut today is very different than it was 100 years ago or whatever. Income tax is one of them.
Can we have a state that successfully deals with some of the major political challenges that face it, all of which call for widespread sacrifice and concession and some sense of mutual obligation, when in fact we have no common sense of who we are or what we want to be.
Connecticut's financial troubles have been particularly unsettling because the state has so long been associated with affluence. Until very recently, Hollywood portrayed Connecticut as a place apart, wealthy, well-heeled, genteel.
You know, you say I'm from Connecticut, and they picture you, spending your weekends and, racing at Lime Rock with Paul Newman and, your evenings around the fireside in Cornwall with Mike Nichols and Francine Duplessis Gray chatting about literature.
Mary, would you spend $7,000 to tear out someone else's walls when for a few thousand more you could find a nice old place in Connecticut, fix it up, and have the kind of dream house you've always wanted?
I beg your pardon?
I came to Connecticut from Illinois, and my image of Connecticut before I got here was extremely vague. I think when I thought of Texas, I thought of a cowboy in a cowboy hat, or when I think of Iowa, I think of a strapping farmer or a brash New Yorker. My image of Connecticut, I think, was of a man in plaid pants in a country club sipping a martini.
Pardon me, Mrs. Lane, but I'm planning on having a farm in Connecticut myself one day. I'd like some good bottom land.
Bottom land?
Yes, that's the best kind for farming, isn't it?
Oh, some people say yes, and some people say no.
But what do you say?
I'm inclined to agree with them.
Oh, thank you very much.
I grew up in a movie theater and in South Dakota, and I had a very clear, very specific image of Connecticut from the movies, and that was why I really wanted to come here. When I was offered a job here, I thought, great, I'm going to that place where they have those beautiful homes in the country with tennis courts and swimming pools and those old station wagons with wood that have 2 matching dogs in the back, and they have those kitchens so big you could land a helicopter, and everybody wears tweeds, and everybody is well dressed and elegant and rather ritzy, and at night they put on tuxedos. And I thought, this is great, this is for me. I can go live there like being in a Hollywood movie.
Pretty country up there. Tree kissing, a famous old Connecticut custom. Barn kissing, a famous old Connecticut custom.
Usually it's a place to escape from. You escape from the city, ugly, corrupt New York, and you come to the country and you expect the uncomplicated pastoral life.
Wife kissing, a famous old Connecticut custom.
You got the idea that people were aristocratic, artistic, theatrical, and they lived well. You look at their homes, and you think, well, everyone in Connecticut's a millionaire. But that's the Hollywood image, and it's a nice image, but completely false.
The first thing I noticed when I got here, which I wrote home back to the folks in South Dakota, was, guess what? This place is full of pizza parlors. I mean, who knew there were Italians here? You didn't know that from the movies. You really didn't know from the movies of my childhood anything ethnic about Connecticut. And now the films that are made about Connecticut frequently focus on the working class, as you see in Mystic Pizza.
Greenwich, my ass! Daisy, look! Daisy, this is Serena Windsor, my sister. Serena, this is Daisy Arujo.
Daisy. Hi.
You have the wealthy boy who's thrown out of Yale for being dishonest or cheating in an exam, and he has trouble with his father, but his father's extremely wealthy. You should see their home.
They were being real jerks. The only jerk at that table was you. They were just being themselves. Bring home your poor Portuguese girlfriend for dinner.
So you have representatives of the upper class, and then you have the people who own and run, who work in the pizza place. So the clash between the classes is a wonderful opportunity for showing you how they work, how they live. That's almost a course in sociology.
Connecticut's tourism department affectionately promotes an image that evokes the state's colonial past. It's a powerful image, one with which many residents identify.
Looking for a special place to spend your vacation? Come to Connecticut. You'll find 350 years of classic vacation ideas.
We're promoting Connecticut as quintessential New England. As example, this beautiful New England-style church behind me on the Litchfield Green, classic Connecticut, pride of New England. We feel we're very much part of New England, classic state, classic colonial villages and classic attractions, classic landscape.
The coast, the city, the country. Classic Connecticut, the pride of New England.
Our problem with promoting and selling Connecticut is that people have their own image of Connecticut who have never been here before, and a great many of them, unfortunately, don't associate Connecticut with New England, or else they think that we're just a suburb of New York.
What's a classic vacation? One that's a surefire hit.
We've always been between New York and New England. We've been caught between in many ways, and it's been difficult for us over the years to forge our own identity. And you can see what difficulty we've had if you just look around. You see that our state song, for instance, is not even about Connecticut. Yankee Doodle. It's about a person. We've got to be the only state in the nation whose song isn't about itself.
The purpose was back in early 1977 to establish a state song. They felt that there was a need for a state song to give us identity when the governor or other dignitaries would show up at events. So a hearing was held, and many people wrote songs and had all kinds of different people performing them. Some were on recording and some were live. And spent a whole day in the hearing. Some of the songs were great, and some of the songs were not so great, but everybody put their heart into it.
Our identity today is deeply rooted in our history. Our sense of place over the past 350 years has grown much more complicated. To really know ourselves, we need to know our past. Just 2 years after the violent displacement of Connecticut's Native American peoples in 1637, the General Court of Colonial Connecticut drew up the Fundamental Orders. The orders both established a government and defined our first common identity, derived from a central authority.
The state really begins with the coming of Thomas Hooker and a group of people from Massachusetts who came here for economic reasons, but also, and very predominantly, for religious reasons.
The Puritan was high thinking and plain living. The Puritans were also very community bound. And they weren't always concerned about their community out of a sense of community. They were concerned about their community because if somebody in the community sinned, the whole community was going to suffer.
The land of steady habits goes back to old colonial notions of stability and of that Puritan Commonwealth, which was very collective in its approach. And every time the Department of Tourism puts a congregational spire on some tourist document, whether they know it or not, what they're saying is, what they're suggesting is that collective sense of mutual obligation, shared belief of mutual commitment that was the hallmark of the Puritans.
They established the commons in the midst of many of the towns, a shared space, very practical for grazing animals. But it also had a symbolic and a beautiful quality to it. The church was put on the green.
If there was a time when Connecticut had a clearly defined self-image, it was this Puritan era. Puritan Connecticut was collective, but it was also suspicious of change and insisted on conformity. Congregationalism was the official state religion until 1818.
It was an exclusive society. Only God-fearing Congregationalists could survive here or be accepted. If anyone moved in to Connecticut, he had to be voted on by the community to become a citizen and a member of the church.
Yeah, well, actually, the very first people who came, the first European people who came to Connecticut actually were the Dutch, who sailed up the river looking for chocolate. And so far, no one has ever actually found any in Connecticut, which I think maybe accounts for the sense of, blunted frustration you feel here. As for the original Puritans, well, a lot of those were my ancestors, and of course they were opposed to fun, and we've tried to carry on that tradition here in Connecticut too.
The blue law state, and that was an expression that was coined about Connecticut in the 19th century, in the
19th century was to a certain extent true. We still have blue laws in Connecticut that are a residue of that Puritan tradition. People use this expression banned in Boston. But the fact is that Massachusetts legalized theater in the 1790s. In 1800, Connecticut banned theater altogether. And that law remained on the books of Connecticut until 1852, which is remarkable. No other state in the Union had a law forbidding theater.
I can remember a few years ago, the Hartford Office of Cultural Affairs was talking about having sort of a law that allowed sort of mummers and buskers and, you know, spontaneous street performers, you know, out there on the street, that would allow sort of street musicians to, you know, to be around, and magicians and stuff on the sidewalks and stuff. And the city council voted it down because they thought it would be a little too spontaneous. You know, you can imagine what would happen if things got a little too spontaneous in Hartford. I mean, things would just spiral out of control in no time whatsoever.
The early 19th century saw dramatic change in Connecticut as a growing emphasis on the importance of the individual marked the advent of the Yankee era. Our colonial roots actually contain two distinctly opposite ways of looking at ourselves. The hallmark of the Puritan age had been communalism. The legacy of this new era was individualism.
What happened over time is that this otherworldliness, this community sense, this willing to accept an authoritarian social and political structure, these became diluted and then sharply undermined. And the Yankee then becomes a person whom we think of as materialistic, this worldly, out for the main chance.
We think of the Yankee trader, the Yankee tinkerer, the individual, the entrepreneur, the self-made man. That sense of ourselves, which is organized around entrepreneurship, around hard work, around seizing the main chance, those kinds of values are completely opposed to what we inherited from the Puritans. That was a great sea change in Connecticut history, was that transition from Puritanism to individualism.
And I think that in Connecticut as well, as a practicality, goes the whole notion of the Connecticut Yankee here and the inventiveness of the Connecticut Yankee. Because again, the term, who is a Yankee? You always put Connecticut in front of it. It's not merely just New England, it's the Connecticut Yankee for the most part. And even Mark Twain's Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Terribly inventive person.
You got the biggest badge I ever saw on any cop in my life. Am I in my right mind? And if I am, canst telleth me where in the helleth I am?
Now I know that thou art mad. Yonder lies Camelot Castle, King Arthur's court. Thou art in his vast domain.
One of us is cuckoo. It can't be you. It must be me. Because that certainly ain't no part of Connecticut.
I come from a family which regards itself as an old Yankee family, and I think one thing that's a sort of a litmus test is you have to have sort of a very pinched, crabbed attitude towards money, and you have to have a lot of digestive troubles. Usually, Yankees, because they worry a lot and they're concerned about everything, and it's difficult for them to enjoy life.
It was during the Yankee era that Connecticut acquired one of its more enigmatic nicknames, the Nutmeg State. Nutmegs, imported from Southeast Asia, were hard to come by and expensive. Devious Yankee entrepreneurs earned a reputation for themselves and the state by selling fake nutmegs carved from wood. It was clearly not the Puritan thing to do.
The Nutmeg State, I can't think of a less kind of sexy and tough and big image of state as the Nutmeg State. Then when you dig a little deeper into Connecticut history and you realize that it was not because nutmegs were our native crop here, it was because the people in Connecticut were such shady characters that they carved fake nutmegs to sell. I mean, that even sort of brings it down another notch. I mean, it's the fake Nutmeg State.
To some degree, we tried to hold on to the idea that despite how many races and cultures have come to settle here, we still try to hold on in some ways to the idea that we're Yankees and that we somehow embody all the virtues that the old Yankees did, thrift and industry and self-reliance. And we do as individuals. It's just that as a society, it's sort of ridiculous at this point. If you look around and examine the old virtues compared to what we have here, it just doesn't hold up.
We have lost the unity of the Yankee past, but have we replaced it with another kind of unity? I don't think we have. I mean, we've replaced it with a lot of diversity, and some of it's for economic reasons, some of it's from ethnic and racial reasons.
Although we think of hard work and thrift as Yankee traits, they are in fact common attributes of immigrants to Connecticut. Laotian refugees Sammy and Shansamon Pompikti moved to Connecticut in 1987.
Why did you come to Connecticut?
My friend told me got a lot of job here, and I need a job.
How hard did you work when you got here? How many hours did you work a day?
I work 14 hours.
14 hours a day.
When we first came, we feel, we cannot have anything like the people have. They have car, they have house, they have TV, everything. We hope to have too. We start to work.
Do you know what a Connecticut Yankee is?
I don't know who's Yankee until now. I don't know. I just knew Yankee, but I don't know who's Yankee.
The Yankee era was characterized by rapid industrialization. In topsoil poor Connecticut, industry was a source of newfound affluence and a new identity. By the start of the 20th century, Connecticut was the most industrialized state in the nation.
Connecticut industry has played a great role in the development of the country. What Connecticut contributed was really the development of mass production, the idea of the interchangeability of machine parts. So that in Connecticut, you had the development of mass production successively, from guns to clocks to sewing machines to bicycles to automobiles and finally to aircraft engines, all of which took place in Hartford and New Haven and cities like that.
And as time went on, these cities developed very strong identities. You had the Hat City, you had the Silver City, you had the Brass City, you had the Rubber City, and people tended to identify with those industries and to identify very strongly with those cities.
Today, as new storm warnings are raised, our country, our way of life must be defended.
We have always thought of ourselves as being the front line of our nation's defense, but here too our self-image is under stress.
Time is short. The all-out for defense has sounded, and as the youth of Connecticut answered the call to arms, the industries of Connecticut answered the call for arms. All-out defense means all-out production, and this is a job that Connecticut well understands.
It's been very strongly defense-based since the beginning of this country. You know, one of the other names for Connecticut is the provision state. Provisions, in that sense, means providing for people who are at war. You know, the most sophisticated weapon in the world is made here, the Trident submarine made in Groton. But throughout our history, we've been a provider of lead for bullets and uniforms for soldiers and guns for soldiers, and that has made us different than the rest of New England and allowed us in many respects to develop a sort of a unique economy here.
We have had a tremendous amount of federal government money spent in this state on armaments. Our dependence upon armaments has been bad for the state in the long picture. In the late 1980s and the early 1990s, we felt it very, very much as defense budget began to shrink.
Since early in the 19th century, immigration has been an enormous force in the life of our state, both enriching it and creating new tensions. By 1910, 70% of the state's population were either first or second generation immigrants.
The Connecticut Yankee really lost his hegemony in the mid-19th century as the Irish and then the Germans and Scandinavians. Later in the 20th century, Southern and Eastern Europeans, Italians, Poles, Russians, and others all came, and when they came to these shores, they came to where the work was, and a lot of the work, because of the Industrial Revolution, was in Connecticut. And they came to mills like these to find jobs.
Leo Tetral's grandfather left Canada for Connecticut at the turn of the century. His was typical of the Connecticut immigrant experience.
What drew the French Canadians to this area? Was it work? Or?
Work. No question about that. It was work. French people have the hard work culture. And, of course, the people in charge of the mills recognized that. And as a result, of course, it was easy to get a job. Didn't pay much, a few dollars a week. In fact, I worked for as little as $5.50 a week for 48 hours of work. But the wages were enough for these families to survive. They knew how to make the most of every penny that they had.
What happened in Connecticut also happened lots of other places, all right? Waves of similar immigrants. I think what happened in Connecticut, to make it a little bit different, is that it happened in a very small place, all right? And it happened not in one huge city. It happened in many cities all over the state, each one with its own ethnic mix. To me, it's the variety in such a small space that is unique to Connecticut.
For some, the changes that accompanied immigration seemed to threaten the essential order and stability of community life.
What happened in the 19th century, especially the late 19th century, as you have immigrants coming into Connecticut, you also have people in Connecticut becoming very anxious about all the change that's taking place. And what you have beginning around 1876 is something called the Colonial Revival. The Colonial Revival is an attempt to look back at what people conceived of as a much more stable, tranquil, peaceful, restful time. And they look back to the village. And what they did is not take the village as it was, but as they wanted it to be. They literally build up a new concept of the New England village. And Litchfield is a prime example.
I think our image of New England is drawn from a sort of mythical colonial past. When we picture a New England town, we think of the common, the green, we think of white colonial structures, we think of a sort of orderly existence. This is mythical because Connecticut was really not that orderly. There was a lot of contention on the local level. But that is our sense of our past, and I think it's precious to us. I think we value colonial buildings and small towns.
This period of rapid industrialization and immigration was also characterized by heightened racial and ethnic tensions. Hostility and suspicion toward those perceived as different had long been a part of Connecticut life.
Connecticut has a very long history of racism, beginning with the Indian Wars, the Pequot Wars. We had slavery in Connecticut. One of the major slave ports was Newport, and the whole area around Narragansett, into New London, into Norwich, up even into places like Hebron, major slave areas. Whenever abolitionists came in, wanted to speak, you had riots, wholesale riots.
Coming from Puerto Rico, you don't even think about other ethnic groups because, there are none. So you tend to feel that everybody's treated the same way. And there's no reason white collar should come into the picture as far as treating other people. So I would say that was probably the first thing that surprised me when I came to the state back then when I was 9 years old, is the fact that because people were black or Hispanic, I found they were treated, you know, a little bit different. And I had a hard time understanding that.
Today, racial minorities remain concentrated in Connecticut's urban areas. 3 of these cities are among the 10 poorest in the nation. Despite our self-image of affluence, there are 2 Connecticuts which rarely come in contact with each other.
While I think we're ethnically and racially diverse, we're certainly not integrated. Our communities aren't integrated, our school systems are not integrated. Various racial and ethnic groups live in pockets all over the state.
It's like Fairfield and the state represent the enamel around the tooth, the glossy part. But then now these decayed centers in Stamford and New London and Waterbury and Bridgeport and New Haven and Hartford. Somehow this contradiction must be exposed and it must come to an end.
13-year-old Milo Sheff goes to school in Hartford, where 90% of public school students are minorities. Just over the border in suburban West Hartford, the student body is 84% white. To integrate Connecticut's racially segregated urban and suburban schools, civil rights groups sued the state in 1989. The suit, filed on behalf of Milo and 17 other students, is now making its way through the courts.
We are moving towards a multicultural, multi-ethnic, globally connected world. Our children have to be prepared to live in that world. They can't be prepared to live in that world if they're segregated, if all they know, as Milo said, is their own little hometown theories.
You just can't, like, go to one school and have all of the same race. You need to have different races so we can learn about each other. And instead of saying, well, I don't like this whole race because of one person did something to you, you need to learn about all the other people.
And where do people ever acquire unifying identities? It comes from interacting with each other. Some commonality of interest, right? Whether it's a member of some labor force or whatever. But to the extent that these things are declining as the sites of occupation, these factories and so forth, to the extent that our cities no longer are places where there's ethnic interaction and more kind of ethnic enclaves under siege in some sense, right? We don't have the mechanisms that generate that type of common identity.
Who we are is sort of in a state of fluidity. We're heading towards a new reality, and that is that Connecticut, as most of our folks pronounce the name, is a home for a lot of our folks. And will continue to be the home for a lot of our folks, and will continue to sort of be the place where our folks want to bring up their children, have them go to school, have them get a good job, contribute to whatever it may be, everything from Desert Storm to working in a school. This is our place.
The song I have written illustrates the fact that people have come from all different walks of life and from many lands to make our state as great as it is. I love Connecticut with its heritage. It's called the Constitution State. Her history's oak-framed proud men all came to this land so great. And then with great skill cities did build where our dreams could be fulfilled. Connecticut was born to stay, the pride of the USA. So come, Connecticuters, heed the call to keep Connecticut for all. A place where men with hearts free can share the opportunity. Let's keep her strong and work each day so future men will proudly say, Connecticut was born to stay, the pride of the USA.
Another force that fractures our sense of state identity is geographic segmentation. Though Connecticut is the third smallest state in the nation, most of us see it as a collection of several smaller and distinctly different regions.
In spite of the fact that the state is roughly 100 miles east to west and 60 to 80 miles at its widest north-south extreme, the concerns and the interests and the focus of dairy farmers in the northeastern part of the state in a town like Thompson are far, far different than the concerns, the interests, and the focus of an urban, suburban population like what we'd find in Fairfield County or in Bridgeport, for example.
Tens of thousands every day pass through the Constitution State in their rat race from Boston to New York. To them it's just 200 miles of winding highway snake, or the trains along the Northeast Corridor.
Connecticut has always been deeply influenced and divided by its location between its two powerful neighbors. For some, Connecticut has a decided New York bent. For others, a New England flavor.
A lot of people in this part of the state talk about the Q Bridge. The Q Bridge is a main part of their life. They sit in traffic for a long time in the Q Bridge. And it sort of separates New York from New England in a lot of people's minds. When you're waiting in traffic on the bridge, you are still stressing out about your job. You are still worrying about what you're going to fix for dinner. You're still worrying about whether it's going to rain or snow before you get home. You get over the bridge, the farther away from the bridge you get, a lot of people tend to relax. The traffic eases up a little bit. The view gets much nicer. The Q Bridge separates New York from New England for a lot of people.
The most often noted border is the one that separates Fairfield County from the rest of the state. Our image of affluence is derived largely from wealthy Fairfield County communities.
Greenwich has a different class of people in many respects, in that a large number of our population earn their livelihood in New York City. And they, on a daily basis, take the train into New York City and are in the city for a good 10 or 12 hours a day and return here to live. Greenwich has been known in some cases as a bedroom community for New York City, which is very true.
Do you feel that you are a Connecticut resident?
I'm a Connecticut resident. My driver's license says so. But if I'm traveling someplace in the world, and somebody asks, where are you from? I say, I'm from the New York area. To say Greenwich, Connecticut is unknown. People envision wooden bridges and backcountry areas, which Greenwich is not. Greenwich is basically a suburb of New York, as is the better part of Fairfield County.
As some see it, Litchfield County is on its way to becoming an exurb of New York.
In recent years, you've had a lot of New York people, as we call them here in Connecticut, moving up into Litchfield County as well, into second homes or just going to live there, and really transforming a lot of formerly utterly unself-conscious farm towns into these sort of sleek bastions of exurbanite New York. You've got fancy restaurants up there now, you've got fancy shops, you've got a lot of people driving around in fancy cars. And those Litchfield County towns were so quintessentially Connecticut. And now they've got such a strong New York influence that it's changed quite a bit.
They love the sense of history here and Americana here and rootedness here, and that this is what America's all about. They love the small town rituals and so on that they're not a part of. They're not really part of it, but they like being in a place where it's happening.
The sense of place, just 125 miles on the other side of the state, is quite different.
There's a nickname for this part of the state.
The quiet corner. Some people laugh at that. It isn't that quiet, but I think it's well named. If you fly over here on an airplane from Washington to Boston, you'll find this is still a dark area in the whole eastern megalopolis.
Do you think that people feel that they're in the same state as, say, Fairfield County?
I think sometimes they feel they're in Massachusetts. because they're so close to the media there. Even politics, they're more worried about who's going to become governor up there, about their budget than ours, and knew more about it. But it's sort of a natural thing.
You live here. You don't live here. So zap New York and get connected to Connecticut on Connecticut TV.
The basic underlying reason was to get more viewers who were watching outside television stations to start watching Connecticut television stations. We have an enormous number of television households that, even though they're physically located here in this marketplace, are watching New York television, Providence, Rhode Island television, Springfield, Mass.
It's news about your town, not the Bronx. It's the weather here, not in Boston.
And what we found was that these people felt, for some compelling reason, that New York television had greater authority.
Watch Connecticut TV, channels 3, 8, 20, 30, 61, and CPTV. Get connected to Connecticut TV.
The influence of both New York and Boston can be seen even in the state's divided sports loyalties.
The players may say the rivalry is dead, but don't tell the fans.
The Red Sox. Base hit left field. Rivera scores.
Yankee fan all the way.
And gone for a home run.
Being a Yankee fan, I hate Red Sox fans. They're arrogant. Yankee fans are those that talk about.
Up the middle and a base hit.
I like the Red Sox. I really hate the Yankees, but I'm a Giants fan, so that's kind of a contradiction. I like both cities.
And a looper to center field, and that is going to be trouble.
Well, see, that's the problem there, because Connecticut's...
There is no Connecticut identity.
I think the strongest team that Connecticut roots for is probably the Celtics. Very spoiled.
Well, yeah, the Celtics, you have the Giants as well. The
Giants, yeah.
But as in baseball, you're divided.
It's got to be the Yankees, definitely.
I root for the New York Mets.
Boston Red Sox, New England Patriots, because that's where we live. Yeah!
Connecticut. Yes, Connecticut. What exactly is Connecticut? Let's see if we can find out. The state can be divided into 7 geographical areas. This area right here is the New York suburbs. This is not really Connecticut. They identify completely with the Big Apple. When they say the city, they're not talking about Hartford. It's very expensive and exclusive down here. The average price of a home is several $100,000. That's not really Connecticut. This area is Litchfield County, playground of the stars. A lot of artists and celebrities from New York summer here. Many live year-round. A lot of money here. Out here people pay high prices for antiques. You can get the same thing cheaper in the real Connecticut.
Until the mid-1800s, Connecticut, like other states, was primarily agricultural, with most people sharing a rural culture. But its poor and rocky soil made farming a losing proposition. When the American frontier moved west, many of Connecticut's farmers followed. Into the early 20th century, small-town rural values still prevailed, as many Connecticut residents either lived on or had grown up on farms. But by 1950, there were only 16,000 working farms in Connecticut. Today, there are 4,300.
When I first came around here about 40 years ago or more, it was a very different culture. It was agricultural, basically. And there were traditions that were carried on from generation to generation. They shared the same work, basically. They were farmers. And that creates, of course, a culture all its own. This is the 20th century. What it's done, basically, is to root people out of the land. And it will more and more.
You move into cities, you have vast numbers of face-to-face relationships in a day. Most of these become anonymous. In the days of the little village, you only saw 20 people a day. You knew all of these people. You greeted these people. You stopped to talk to these people. You cared about them. You hated some of them. You loved some of them. You're probably not neutral about any of them. You move into cities, you're neutral about almost everybody, and you don't care. So that city living, which comes with industrialization, makes a tremendous difference.
As industrialization and urbanization continued, Connecticut's population became more mobile. With the demise of company-dominated towns and the emergence of multinational corporations in the 20th century, the trend became more pronounced, further cutting us off from a shared vision.
I think we're standing in a place that reflects in some ways, in fact a great many ways, what Connecticut's identity has become. What you're looking at is the yarn mill at Cheney Brothers, one of the largest silk manufacturing companies in the country. That yarn mill produced yarn and therefore produced jobs, thousands of jobs in this entire mill area. Today it's apartments, because today we have moved from being a primarily industrial economy to a post-industrial mixed economy, much greater reliance on service jobs.
There is, I suspect, a substantial number of folks in Connecticut who are here for a few years and then gone somewhere else. How many of us stay here long enough to have a sharp sense either of the history of the place or any sense of commitment to its future?
I don't see a commonality of cultural attitudes, at least in the big middle class, which is what dominates this state. All that holds them together is the sunshine. They're all sitting in the same sun. And that isn't much, really. So it lacks character which comes from a tradition. And the tradition comes from people who've lived in the same place for a long time.
In 1991, for the first year since the boom years of the 1980s, more people moved out of Connecticut than moved into the state. Many left in search of jobs. Unemployment has risen dramatically since the recession came to Connecticut 3 years ago. The state's historically strong economic mainstays, manufacturing and insurance, have both hit hard times. The insurance industry, which once virtually guaranteed a job for life, continues to lay off workers. Manufacturing, beset by out-of-state competition and defense cutbacks, has been steadily declining. At the Polish-American Falcons Club in New Britain, the search for jobs has affected both family and state ties.
My son just moved out to Texas, and it's the job market. Job market that motivates him to go.
My son's out in California. He left for the same reason. The job market was better out there than it was here. And I have a daughter in Florida also who left because of employment.
When you're young, when you're 22 years of age, you don't worry about the state, do you? Yeah, he's worrying about the job. He can always make new friends, meet new friends. Social life is there. What else does he need?
Promising job prospects brought Maria Torres and her family to Bridgeport in the 1950s.
Do you plan to stay in the state for the rest of your life?
Honestly, with the budget crisis that the state of Connecticut is going through now and the bankruptcy issue that the city of Bridgeport is facing, my husband and I are seriously thinking of relocating. For instance, I find myself in a very difficult situation because I have a son who's going to be going to college next year, and I'm also facing, a very high mill rate coming up next year. So I would rather spend the money, my son's college education, somewhere else where the cost of living is less, than to spend an additional $300 on my mortgage.
The search for Connecticut continues. This is the capital, Hartford. It looks like a cross between New York, Boston, and Newark. Centrally located, a lot of people like it because it's halfway between New York and Boston. I like it because it's halfway between Providence and Albany. The suburbs of Hartford are like any other suburbs in any other town in the country. A lot of people who move here from other states like to live in the suburbs. That way they feel like they haven't moved. It looks like the last suburb they moved in. Same McDonald's, same mall, same stores. It's familiar. This area, New Haven, is academia. Yale, Wesleyan University, plus a bunch of other colleges and schools are down here. A lot of analyzing and heavy thoughts being funked down here. These people talking in multisyllabic pentametricals, that ain't really Connecticut.
Clearly, Connecticut's identity is fractured, complex, and changing. In the midst of change, is there anything that can bring us together, with which we can all still identify? Is our identity our lack of identity?
I enjoy being in a state that doesn't have a clear identity to the rest of the world. I think because that means we're not pigeonholed, we're not stereotyped. And I think that's a very good thing. I mean, there's something very obnoxious about that image of the classic Texan or the guy from Missouri who says, "Show me," or the New Yorker or the Californian or almost any other state you could name has this very annoying person who symbolizes it. And I think we in Connecticut don't. If we do have a person who symbolizes us, he's an insurance salesman, which can be pretty annoying too. But I think basically we don't. When people think of Connecticut, they don't think of anything in particular.
I mean, there are probably hundreds of Connecticut's. I mean, I think the rest of the world might think of Connecticut as the Martha Stewart state, where everybody walks around in a white linen dress with beautifully arranged flowers on their table and makes goat cheese appetizers and leads this country chic life. But when you go to Derby, you could think Martha Stewart did not exist. And similarly, if you go to Greenwich, you have that, or New Canaan, or Darien, or Hadlime. I mean, every place has its own take on what Connecticut is, and it's a state that I think in a way reinvents itself every time you cross a border.
I don't know what Connecticut is. It's a nice place to be, and it's a beautiful day today. It's quiet here. And I just hope it finds its way to something more integral. And so it does create more of a character. By the way, the mere fact that we can't name what its character is doesn't mean it doesn't have one. It may simply be that we're in the middle of it and don't see it.
J. Roy Grace is a marketing expert and advertising copywriter who lives in Connecticut. He's made a name for himself writing ad campaigns that make us think of one thing when we hear another.
Mamma mia, that's a spicy meatball.
If I name a state, would you name products that you think might be well associated with that state or benefit from it? California.
Surfing, sun products, wine, fruits, vegetables, clothing, fragrances.
Texas.
Texas. Chili, barbecue, beef, boots, cowboy hats, horses.
Louisiana.
Cajun cooking, jazz.
Maine.
LL Bean, skiing.
Florida.
Sun, surf, vacations.
And Connecticut?
You got me. You got me. There's no there, as Gertrude Stein once said, but I don't mean that. Connecticut's a great state, but, you know, it's like anything that doesn't have that high profile. You know, I'm sure if you did this about New York, you have people talking forever, but nobody wants to live there.
There's something in the name that makes us want to stand and cheer. Its glory and its fame have made a story that is grand and very dear to us. Rebirth of freedom, a helping hand from this rough earth, a gentle land. It's Connecticut, Connecticut, Hail Connecticut, the Constitution State.
What makes an area a good place to live? A number of things, probably.
pleasant residential districts for varying income groups, good schools, centers for cultural programs, excellent medical care facilities, recreational opportunities the year round.
It's a nice place to live, and it's a good place to raise a family.
I think it's a sophisticated, desirable place to live.
It's got a lot to offer, and from corner to corner, it's quite diverse.
Money, money, money. Think Connecticut, you think money. Nice country living, nice place to raise a family.
For many, Connecticut is simply a nice place to live, the quintessential suburban state.
I think we lose sight of a very important element of Connecticut if we don't think of the fact that very early, and maybe much more complete than other states, we invested in the suburban solution to our problems. The suburb as the perfect environment where we have all the benefits of urban life without the disadvantages, and we have the benefits of rural life without the disadvantages. I mean, it has led to problems, too, in the 20th century.
And I don't know what it's based on, but there's a sense that, you know, we don't want to go anyplace else, and we don't want to be anyplace else, and we want everything here exactly the way it is here, and we don't want anything to change.
There are a lot of people here who think, boy, this is a great place to live because I am able to live in a community where there's no crime, where my kids can go to school well fed, everything is taken care of. There are a lot of people, I think, who, and in addition to that, you know, have a nice picturesque surrounding. On the other hand, you have in Connecticut a group of people whose reality and who think of themselves as, when am I going to be able to get my next check in order to cover my rent? What am I going to do if my son or daughter gets sick and has to go to the hospital? And not only that, but then there are people who are questioning even more basic things than that. Where am I going to live next week? It is part of what we are here in Connecticut, that we live in two very different realities.
One of the things about Connecticut that flows from this sense of it as a great place to live is that it's a great place to live by yourself and to retreat to some individual agenda.
A lot of people admire it because it cuts them off from other people, and they don't want to have anything to do with other people. And that's one of the attractions of living this way. You take care of yourself. And that is enviable for a lot of people in many places. They'd love to do that if they could. That is certainly not the classical idea of mankind, which was always social.
Other than a nice yard, access to a wonderful mall, good shops, decent schools in some places. That's it. Is that it? It can't be it.
We're still searching for the real Connecticut. Let's look in this area right here along the Rhode Island border. These people identify with Providence and Boston. Some of them even speak with a Rhode Island accent and eat clam chowder with a clear broth. This isn't really Connecticut. This part of Connecticut is called east of the river. It's very rural, very quiet, economically depressed even in good times. It's like Maine. We're supposed to be in the wealthiest state in the Union, so this must not really be Connecticut. So where is the Connecticut you've heard so much about? The Connecticut of books, movies, and fables. It's in here, and in here.
Where then do we find Connecticut? What does hold us together? Ironically, one thing that all Connecticut cities and towns have in common is a strong strain of localism. When Connecticut does think of itself, it does so primarily in local terms.
There are 169 towns in Connecticut,
thousands of sights along the way. So come and get acquainted with the Constitution State. In Connecticut, there's nothing far away. And you might like it, so you'll want to stay.
I think there's 169 towns or something like that. And really, if you talk to people in Old Sabra, they are mortally offended by the idea that anything happening in Old Lyme, has anything to do with what's happening in Old Saybrook. I don't think there's another place in the world that has the kind of town identity.
Connecticut had county government for a while, and then they got rid of it. The tendency is to sort of add government as you go along. Connecticut, I think, is unique in that respect, as having eliminated a layer of government, which indicates that this state and small town relationship and identity is very important to people.
Perhaps one of the greatest myths about Connecticut, indeed I'd say it about most of New England, is the idea that we are a society run by our town governments, that the towns are the locus of power, original power lay in the towns, that our states are mere confederations of autonomous towns. That's a potent myth for 200 years. It is a myth, however. In fact, the towns in Connecticut, historically and legally and constitutionally, have never been from 1633 to the present autonomous in any sense of the word. They have always been agents of the state.
The limits of localism have come into sharp relief lately as Connecticut grapples with problems that defy solution at the local level. As statewide obligations have increased, federal revenue sharing has declined. Can a clear sense of state identity lead to greater sacrifice for the common good?
I don't think that there's going to be a trend back to looking to the federal government for solutions to problems. The financial requirements are really going to be at the local level, the state level. I think it in large measure sharpens the issue and really demands that people have a debate about what an identity is being from Connecticut means. Perhaps the latest debate on whether we ought to have a state income tax is somewhat symbolic of this notion that we don't yet have a sense of real community, a sense of sacrifice.
Not in my town, you don't. It is the explanation for a lot of the disasters that we face as a society. This goes back to that issue of what is it that ought to link us with those around us, and if that link is solely on a town-by-town or a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis, none of these problems are going to have any resolution.
The reality in which we live today demands that we have an income tax, demands that we look at regional solutions to problems, demands that we look at school desegregation, demands that we have common solutions to common problems that we all share, whether we like it or not. That's where we're heading, and that's what's going to produce, hopefully sooner than later, what we are all about.
Our devotion to our towns has been our common ground for much of our history. The challenge is that we now need to extend that commitment beyond town lines.
To the extent that we can preserve the feeling of community that I think grows out of the town, grows out of face-to-face contacts that you find only in the town, that would be a great thing to do. If we're going to have a revived sense of responsibility, which surely we must have, perhaps it will come out of the town. Towns can no longer act as islands. They have to recognize higher responsibilities, and they don't.
It is time for a change.
If our sense of identity is, in fact, individual rather than collective, that the function of our society is to let me get what I want, then we've lost that opportunity to work together around some kind of common goal. What do I owe this person that makes me willing to sacrifice something of my own for his benefit is one of the questions that a sharper shared sense of identity might help resolve.
I think the challenge is to find in our political history an area in which we can come together and understand how it all fits together, because it does in some sense, the towns and the counties and the state as a whole. My sense is that a positive self-identity is a very good thing, and that it should be informed by a sense of history.
Any kind of change discomforts people. That's where tensions arise. And I think that's what we
we see today is that these changes are occurring, and some people don't like them, and they have a number of choices. Either they can go on and live in their little dream worlds and spin their world of myth and try to stay there and live the tension that creates, so they can recognize what's there and try to help the transition, which is a continuum. The transition never stops.
Near the end of the day, Mr. O'Neill, who was Speaker of the House at that time, had a suggestion, so he brought in the East Hampton Fife and Drum Corps to play Yankee Doodle out in the corridor, and proposed right on the spot that Yankee Doodle be the state song, and everyone said that's a great idea, and after a whole day of waiting around, that was the end of our efforts. Yankee Doodle.
Yankee Doodle, take your crown, riding on a pole.